Hello and welcome to the Hack Responsibly podcast, where we get to know NetSPI's technical leaders. I'm your host, Karl Fossaen, and today we're speaking with Thomas Elling, who leads up our cloud pen testing practice. I've worked very closely with Thomas over the years, and it was great to catch up with him on all things he's been doing in the cloud space and beyond that as well. Here's our conversation with Thomas. Welcome to Hack Responsibly, a NetSPI podcast focused on the experience of our NetSPI agents, including insights and trends in the cybersecurity industry. I'm your host, Karl Fossaen. Today with me, I have Thomas Elling. Thomas, do you want to give everybody a quick background on yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Thomas Elling. I've been at NetSPI for around 10 years now, maybe a little bit more. I'm currently the director of cloud pen testing here at NetSPI, and I specialize primarily in Azure, Entra ID, and M365.
I'm going to pretend like I don't know you all that well after 10 years here, but you and I have definitely worked very closely together on stuff. In terms of what you've been working on lately, what's kind of front of mind for you? What kind of stuff are you trying to tackle these days?
Yeah, no, and I mean it's funny because I feel like you and I are working on a lot of the same things and we collaborate quite a bit, as being a part of, labs and research and all that. But yeah, what we're really focusing on right now from like an I guess I'll speak on an Azure and Entra ID side, and you can kind of extrapolate this to almost every other big, public cloud, right? But I think hybrid identity and identity platforms are of a huge focus right now in the cloud, right? So you can put anything and everything in the cloud, and most people do, right? So when we see different environments, unique environments with different identity configurations, different identity tie-ins, it gives us an opportunity to find something new, to see something new, and testing those unique environments, collecting all that information. Um, it's just something that's really, really interesting right now because everybody's doing things a little bit differently. So you see a lot of interesting stuff out there.
Absolutely. Between different identity providers and integrating those in different clouds or multi-cloud or just all sorts of different federation kind of things with other SSO apps. And yeah, it seems like it's all over the place. A lot to try and tackle there. Well, I know you've been at NetSPI for quite a while here, but do you want to tell everybody how you got your start in cybersecurity?
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a strange start, I suppose, right? So I think 10 years ago when I, graduated from school and all that, everything that I had learned previously was kind of very developer focused, software engineering, whatever. And coming out of that, basically, my skill sets were not geared towards cybersecurity at all. So the first job that I got was here at NetSPI as an intern. And at that time, 10 years ago, we were really focusing on, not so much the robust NetSPI U program that we have today, but, we were looking at laptops, we were doing infrastructure provisioning, we were doing, tool installs and all of that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of what I started off doing and how I got into cybersecurity was funny enough, was kind of like a help desk role, which is kind of funny going from, software engineering background in school to jumping directly into help desk. Everybody says like you got to start with help desk, and I don't know if I'm sold on that honestly, but that experience that I got there did teach me quite a bit that I wouldn't have otherwise learned. So started there. That was kind of our like the precursor to whatever you want to call it, the NetSPI U program. And then from there, I just kept working on different stuff, and I was lucky enough to you know learn under a lot of talented people here at that time at NetSPI, right? Scott Sutherland, now one of the leaders in our product team. Antti Rontasari, who was at the time the web application testing lead. And that was the first, service that I learned was at web app testing, right? So I owe a lot to Antti for sure for, a lot of the things that I learned and a lot of the best practices that he kind of taught me. And then of course, you being one of my first managers at NetSPI when I actually became a real a real tester, right? Um, I learned quite a bit from you as well. So yeah, a bit of a unique way to get into the business, but I was very lucky to have, mentors and leaders there to kind of guide me on the way.
When you've had exposure to a lot of different service lines over the years, I remember you working on thick apps, network pen testing, eventually getting into cloud. I feel like you've gotten a nice variety of service lines over the years here. So it's a fun thing to get into, just dabbling in different things here.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's kind of wild, right? Because it's one of those things that consulting, I think, gives you that unique opportunity to do, is that it's not just about all of the unique and different environments that you're going to see, but also all of the different things that you can do, and sometimes you will be expected to do as part of an engagement. So, I never thought I would find myself doing, like, anti-data scraping stuff or doing research around that, but I that's where I found myself, and it was fun.
Yeah,
It was a really unique opportunity. So
yeah. Well, very cool. So, if you were to go back to early career Thomas here, or anybody, I guess, in their early start of their cybersecurity career, any advice that you would give somebody that is kind of early off in their cybersecurity journey?
yeah, I mean, I think looking back at where I was able to succeed, I think it was just I got a lot of great opportunities. And I think I did my best to try to make the best of those. So I was open to learning as much as I could. It didn't really matter what. I just wanted to learn as much as I could. So I started off with web app, really enjoyed that. Then I started learning external network testing, internal network testing, whatever from there, right? I think I was very open to trying to learn new things and just being eager to try all of those new things, right? So I think that really will give you a bit of a leg up, right? Being that kind of person that wants to learn and you know take on new challenges and things like that, because that just gives you exposure, different ways of thinking of things. I think that's probably the best thing that I would recommend to somebody just trying to get into this field, right?
To be open and willing to take on new challenges?
Yeah, absolutely.
I totally
Yeah.
agree with that.
It's difficult too, because cybersecurity isn't it's definitely an area where things are constantly changing. Everything is changing. Like if you look at the velocity of what we're learning and what we're seeing with AI and ML, and even in the cloud realm, not new by any means, but constantly changing. And being able to adapt to that, I think, is very important. And on the other side of that, being eager to learn. That's it's something that I think it's maybe not even just a piece of advice for people looking to get into cyber. It's people who are going to be in cyber and continuing to grow in cyber. It's just that eagerness to learn, right?
Oh, totally. It's not like the attack surface is getting smaller by the day.
No.
We have all sorts of new technologies every single day. Something new is popping up. I'm like, oh, well,
Mhm.
guess we're going to dig into that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So, speaking of digging into specific technologies, anything like that, do you have a specific technique or tool or approach that you can't live without, something that you're using?
Yeah, no, it's a tough one to pick one, right? I don't know if I can just pick one, but I think recently with what I've been doing and what I've been reading and researching on, what I found to be really cool is kind of the road tools, suite of tools with Road Recon, Road TX and all of that good stuff. I think it does a lot of cool stuff, and it does it quite well. And all of the surrounding resources around that tool set, obviously the creator of the tool, Dirk Jan, just absolutely phenomenal tool set. And just reading the code and understanding how that works, you will learn so much, not just by using the tool, but if you really get into the code and understand what it's doing. It's definitely one of those tools up there with AAD internals, that is kind of one of those, if you're looking to get into testing for Microsoft Identity and Entra and all of that stuff, it's one of those tools you got to know about, right? I think I'm really lucky to have learned it. That's definitely a
Yeah.
cool one. Um,
Yeah.
and I know I
Shout out
said
to
I
Dirk Jan for
yeah,
that.
100%, right? Also had the opportunity to take his offensive security and Entra ID training, which was absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, I also said I couldn't just pick one. So I'll give a shameless shout out to Microburst as well too, because it's one of those things that I think in terms of a tool that we can't live without. It's one that we use all the time for Azure testing. So I don't think we can go without mentioning Microburst at least, right?
Well, I appreciate that, and you've contributed significantly to it, and I agree with you. Its whole purpose was to help support us as we're doing, Azure engagements. But glad to hear the team's getting good use out of it, and it's a practical tool, so it's good to hear. So speaking of, tools and kind of how things have evolved over time, I know, Entra ID and formerly Azure Active Directory, all of that evolution, in the threat landscape of things doesn't have to be particular to cloud here, but in your experience here, what have you seen as the biggest shifts in that threat landscape over the last 5 years or so?
Yeah, and that's a difficult one, right? And I think again, I'll kind of speak from a cloud lens, right? And I think that what this particular question, what it touches on is maybe cloud adoption is something interesting that we could kind of look at there. We've seen all different types of environments, right? And with these different environments and these different, places where we test, cloud adoption and maturity is all over the board. We work with customers who are just onboarding to cloud. Like it's literally their first week and they want to know what they don't know, that kind of stuff, right? And we test in environments that are well established in their cloud provider, right? They've been there for years. And seeing the kind of different maturity levels across these different customers and these different orgs, we do pick up on quite a few different trends, right? And some of the most interesting trends that I think we can tie between any org maturity level is that they all have some of the same issues, right? That cloud and cloud adoption brings with them. We see some orgs that bring some of the old habits and some of the security misconfigurations from a lift and shift, into the cloud, right? And even in well-established cloud orgs and things like that, we still see some older misconfigurations, or we see things like that, right? In terms of the threat landscape, the reason what I'm getting to here across cloud maturity levels is that I think consistent security approach in terms of the way that like you test your systems, and things like that, layering is the key, right? And that is probably applicable, suggestions we can make for every org of every maturity level, right? There's not going to be one single test or one single product or one single whatever that's going to cover you as a silver bullet, right? That's going to make you impenetrable, fix all your problems, right? I think layered security and all of the things that go around those layers and come with that, that's something, that with an evolving threat landscape is maybe the best and most interesting thing to look at when you're considering the security of your environment.
Totally agreed with you there. It's interesting to think back to some of the early cloud clients that we were working with that were doing more of that lift and shift methodology, 10 years ago roughly, as folks were really starting to adopt the cloud, and then contrasting that against folks that are finally getting around to it a decade later. It almost seems late, but also not late. It's an interesting approach, I guess.
Yeah, and it's the thing is it's just so different for each environment too, because in this day and age, it's like it's almost a strange requirement to have some sort of hybrid environment, right? You can't fully get rid of
Yeah.
on-prem. You can't fully move to cloud, whether that be due to compliance or any other kind of regulation or whatever. We're in a new kind of area where, you have to maintain a foot in both worlds. And then the security of both those things will affect, your overall environment, right? So
Well, and
interesting.
sometimes multi-cloud too, right? You got
That's
to be
true.
ready for a potential outage in any of the cloud providers and fall back onto another one, or regionality or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there was a week, maybe last year, where both Azure and AWS went down in the same week or something, and maybe Cloudflare too. And then
Yeah.
that kicked off a bunch of conversations around that. But yeah,
Yeah, I believe we had an Azure Detective Controls test going that week, and we were trying to figure out why we weren't getting anything out of the play that we were running, and all of a sudden we found out that there was an Azure outage that week, and whoops, well, we'll wait a couple hours, try that again.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, fun times. Well, any kind of common security gaps? You mentioned, there's some commonality between some of the late adopters to the cloud and the long established ones. Any real common ones? Take your pick of cloud provider here, but any common vulnerabilities that you're seeing?
Yeah. the big thing that we stress to every single customer is that there's generally very high impact misconfiguration classifications that we look at, right? And that we really try to hammer home on our tests. The first and probably the most important is just the IAM or RBAC based misconfigurations. You know, even the most mature organizations will still have some of that there, right? They may not have some of the most glaring things that you'll see with newer orgs that are less mature or whatever, but IAM and RBAC based misconfigurations that can lead to excessive permissions or privilege escalation or unintended, authorization scenarios that affects every single org in some way, shape, or form, right? So we feel like that's probably the biggest thing and where we spend the most of our time in environments when we're doing our tests is always kind of looking at those different IAM and RBAC kind of I guess avenues for privilege escalation. So that would be the first thing.
Okay.
Following that, probably around public unintended public network access, there's always a new way to accidentally expose things to an IP address range or to the internet or something like that, right? So that's probably another big one. And another one that we would probably kind of look to is, the presence of clear text secrets in the cloud where they shouldn't be, right? So that one is a pretty common one as well too.
Yeah, that it seems surprisingly common. And I'm probably guilty of it myself, where I need to be hard coding key vault entries instead of just dropping something in for a proof of concept. But yeah, the number of times I hear about, oh, well, we just found this, service principal credential just sitting here in a config file or something that's available to a reader on the subscription. Oh man, that one? Really? Okay. Is that
Yeah,
easy?
and it's tough, right? Because I think with some of the cloud platforms, the documentation around, who can actually see some of these things isn't always crystal clear, right? So I mean, yeah, actually, it's more fair to say every cloud provider has that kind of those caveats. And understanding those, very, very important, right?
Totally agreed. So, do you feel like there's any topics or potential vulnerabilities, kind of areas of focus that folks are not talking about enough in the cloud?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Our
Yeah.
views a little skewed because we see a lot of this stuff more closely from a research perspective and other peers in the field. So, I don't know.
That's true. We're our yeah. I mean, our opinions will be a bit skewed here just because we're looking at these things every day. So they seem commonplace to us, but
Right.
I think one of the things that I could probably say, linking back to what we were just talking about with those big three categories, I think combining and chaining those misconfigurations together is maybe the biggest thing that we're not really talking about right now, right? And that's where the impact comes from. Because, your CSPM or your cloud native IDS IPS may catch or prevent one of those things in the chain. But when you start putting those things together, you don't really start to see the end impact until you actually go through that exercise and link those different things together, right? That's probably the most interesting thing that maybe people aren't looking at or talking about just yet. So
I think that's fair. And I think that's something that we aim for in our cloud pen testing service is to show the impact of linking those things together versus and it's not any offense to CSPMs or anything like that, but they kind of do just a single point of, hey, this thing is misconfigured. You need to fix that. But then when we approach it from a CPEN perspective, we're utilizing that to then chain that into something else and then kind of take that up the chain and escalate.
yeah, of course. That to be fair to CSPMs, that isn't to say that there aren't products out there that are trying to do that, right?
Yep.
So I think that's another kind of industry trend is we're going to start to see a lot more work and a lot more, cool research and capabilities coming out of these products that historically weren't there, right? You can probably draw parallels between, what we're seeing in cloud native IDS, IPS, and all of that good stuff to what we saw with, on-prem Active Directory environments, 5, 10 years ago, right? At some
Yep.
point, these two, spheres are going to catch up to each other. If you compare it to like 7 or 8 years ago or whatever, you can't just run Responder in an ADN environment and just win, right? If you remember those days.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think at some point we are going to reach that exact same place in cloud, and it may not be, so far away. So.
The InPen team tells me that that still sometimes happens. It's not every single engagement like it was, 8, 10 years ago, but still occasionally happening.
Yeah, yeah.
But still, yeah, no, we've got other avenues that we got to go through on that now. So speaking of escalations and, fun techniques, things like that, do you have a most memorable engagement and, what made that a memorable one and what kind of things did you learn out of it?
Yeah, and actually this one is maybe the easiest question you're gonna throw at me today. It was actually a project that I think I assisted you with on. So I think you were running primary, and maybe you remember this one. I think was it last year or maybe earlier in the year, but you were able to get
Oh,
to
yeah.
global admin out of a just a humble, access to a container registry and an image, and that got you all the way up to GA, right? And I think the really cool part about that was it actually followed some of the steps that were theorized by many security researchers in the Azure and Entra ID sphere that the apt Midnight Blizzard took. Right. So again,
Yep.
this is all theoretical, right? But you were able to leverage some very privileged permissions that many people thought that this apt had was able to take advantage of, right? And being able to kind of walk in those same footsteps, see that blueprint, and then actually see that come to fruition like a real, that a proven threat actor could have done. Yeah, that's probably one of the most notable things recently, right?
That was a really fun one. And for context for folks, I'm currently VP of Research here at NetSPI, working on new research initiatives, but occasionally I pop back into the cloud team and help them out with engagements. And this was one that I was helping out, I think it was about a year and a half ago. And that one was really fun. Just found credentials that we were able to escalate to a service principal. I think you're right on the ACR image. I think we pulled an ACR image and got the creds out of there. And then that one was that directory role assignment permissions?
I think it was the app role assignment read write all.
There you go. And then we assigned the role to our other user that we had in the tenant and then allowed us to escalate up to global admin. That was quite fun. Yeah.
Yeah, very unique situation. And again, just being able to, you've read all the blogs by, the security providers out there. And I think SpectreOps is one that, had an extremely detailed blog and, the theorized steps and being able to walk those exact same ones. Very, very cool. Right.
And find effectively the same issue with an overpermission service principal. And yeah,
Exactly.
that was a fun real world practicality kind of thing to dive into. Well, to make a bit of a left turn here from more of the technical stuff, for the last part of the podcast here, we like to get a little more personal here and find out a little bit more about yourself. Do you have a favorite hacker book, movie, TV show, anything like that?
I don't know if I can, pick any one specific thing, but I always really, really, really enjoyed the scene in Jurassic Park where it's a Unix system. I know
Yep.
this. I know it's not necessarily like that movie is filled with like very small tidbits of like, hacker stuff, right? I don't know if it would be anybody's really like kind of traditional pick, but that was a movie that I really loved growing up, and having kind of those small things in there, I can't help but think kind of influenced, where I ended up to today. So I would go
I
with that one.
I like it. I was actually just at Universal Studios and went through the Jurassic Park thing, and it was fun to relive some of that. I used to drive a Ford Explorer that was very similar to the ones that they used in the movies. Now, granted, it was years after the movie, but
Mhm.
definitely had fun seeing that out at the park. Good choice.
Yeah, no thanks.
I know that we have been to a number of different conferences over the years together, both presenting and just attending. Do you have a favorite conference to go to?
Oh man, that's a really difficult one. Because there's just been so many good ones, right? And I think I've been very lucky in that I don't think I've ever attended a conference that was just like, oh man, never want to go back to that. I think every one that I've been to has been, really well organized, great talks, the people that you meet there, all great. So if I had to pick one, right, I think DerbyCon probably would have been one of my favorites in recent memory, and I know it's no longer around, right? I think the one that I went to was maybe a year or two before it officially ended, right? So maybe I can't remember which one it was or what year it was, but it was the one that Offspring was at. So I think what made that conference really good was there was just a great kind of collection of researchers there. The talks were great, meeting a lot of new people because again, it was still relatively early in my career. So just being able to meet all of these, very famous names in the industry and kind of learn from them. And it's just, it was a very unique conference too, like I mentioned with, having Offspring there. I don't think that's not typical for of a conference or whatever. So it was very unique, and I think that one is one that would be missed. So I do have good memories from that one.
So I had to look it up. That was 2018, and yes, that was the second to last one. The last one was 2019,
Right. Yep.
where they had Sublime.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So it has become a joke in my household because I spoke at the one that you're talking about in 2018. I like to joke with my wife that I once opened for the Offspring, and she doesn't buy it. No,
Yeah. No.
that doesn't count. I wasn't playing music. I did a talk, and I just happened to be at the same conference. But you know what?
Same
I'm going to
venue.
count it. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Why
yeah.
not?
Well, outside of work, I think many of us, hackers inside of work, many of us are hackers outside of work, setting up home labs, networks, all that kind of fun stuff. Any personal tech projects that you'd like to share with anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have anything really cool to talk about there, but I got a Meshtastic node, kind of over the holiday break here, so I've been kind of learning about that and messing with that. So it was basically just a plug and play node, right? So it's not anything crazy where I made it myself, but yeah, just learning about that was kind of interesting. And I've been messing with that here and there before things get too crazy here, but yeah, that's probably the most recent thing.
And I'm a little bit jealous. I'm not going to out your location here, but I think you have a much more dense mesh network than where I'm at.
Oh, yeah.
I have nobody nearby. I think I'm single-handedly holding up my neighborhood with the local mesh.
Huh? Yeah, no, like I think I'm lucky too that I'm in an area that is like quite dense and populous. Yeah, the network that we have here is pretty cool. So, yeah,
And
it's
I
if
get
you're interested, check it out and see what your local area looks like, and maybe you can be the start of something there. So,
There you go. Yeah, I've been trying to convince some neighbors to get on board with it and expand our mesh network for the neighborhood, but also I don't know who's going to use it or for what purpose or whatever. But I get maybe a message per week coming in from all over the place. That is the nice thing of where we're at is I'm getting random messages from way far off. So it's kind of fun.
oh yeah, yeah. And I mean the cool part about it too, I think, is that it's not prohibitive to get started. Like some like average plug and play node prices are like what, $50, like not the
Yeah,
most expensive thing in the world. I mean, they can get up there too, but just to get started, you could even, if you really want to get into it and make your own kits and all that, you can go for much cheaper. So
yeah, I've got one of those solar lights sitting behind me right now that I need to put a node into and give to a friend here. But I'll find some time here, start of the year.
yeah.
But well, cool. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with our audience here?
No, no, I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay.
You can find me on LinkedIn. I rarely post, but that might change in the next year or so. But yeah, I often attend different cloud conferences, so planning some for 2026. So hopefully, yeah, if I get into any this year, well, I'll be able to share some of my research. So yeah, looking forward to that if that happens.
Well, very cool. Yeah, I won't spoil where you or myself or the two of us might be submitting this year, but I know that we've got a few on the list that we're hoping to get into. So
Mm.
really looking forward to those this year.
Yeah,
Keep my fingers
absolutely.
crossed. Well, very cool. Well, folks have questions or want to follow up with you, like Thomas said here, feel free to reach out via LinkedIn or you can reach out to NetSPI via the NetSPI website or myself here, I'm available on LinkedIn, all the other social platforms, pretty much as K Fossaen, pretty much anywhere there. But yeah, if anybody does have questions, feel free to reach out. And Thomas, I really appreciate the time today. It was great catching up with you, and thanks again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was good talking to you and everybody. So yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. And that was our chat with Thomas Elling. Thanks for joining the Hack Responsibly podcast. If you'd like more episodes, make sure that you like, subscribe, follow all the things, and check out the NetSPI website to get connected with us. Thanks again, and remember, hack responsibly.